Hey there. We made it to part 13 in our review of the Chris Watts interrogation, and I had a monumental revelation by covering this section of the interrogation that we'll get to at the end. But first things first, where we left off at part 12, Chris had finally admitted to at least one of the murders that he actually did. He admitted it to his dad when they were alone in the interrogation room. And at the first mention of a lawyer from Chris's dad, Graham and Tammy rushed back in from the room where they had been listening and immediately tried to take his attention away from the idea of a lawyer. And Tammy made the ultimate sacrifice. And I could just feel the slime on my own hand when she started rubbing his back. I could smell oily BO when she was all up in his face saying, "You okay? You okay?" She made the ultimate sacrifice, knowing what he was and getting that close and intimate with him to distract him. I wouldn't want Tammy to interrogate me. Remember a few videos ago I said if I was a billionaire, I'd pay Graham to just for fun? With Graham, you can tell if he's shaking your hand or smacking your face, but with Tammy, you never really know if she's kissing you or sinking in her teeth. That's too scary. So Chris is now, what he's doing by admitting to murdering Shanann because he saw her murdering the kids, is he's putting on a new mask because his other mask has been destroyed by Graham and Tammy. The mask of the loving family man who would never do anything bad to anybody, let alone the family that he loves more than life itself. And they said, "We don't believe that at all, Chris." So then they crafted a new mask for him, and he's putting that on now. And it's that mask of the good family man who made a terrible mistake and now regrets it and wants to do the right thing about it. So Chris is really getting into this performance now that Graham and Tammy are back in the room with Chris and his dad. And they're asking him to, "Okay, Chris, now that you're ready, tell us more about what happened. We're all in on this together. We're all helping you show us that you're a good man." And Chris is doing some method acting here, actually. It's just another version of the doublespeak that we've covered before, where he is drawing from things that he really believes, but intends it to come out in a way that supports the mask he's wearing. And now his new mask is the loving family man who made the terrible mistake and now regrets it. But what he's drawing from is realizing that he's admitted to murder. And that's starting to flow in slowly. It's starting to flow into his mind about what that really means to admit to murdering somebody. Because he had gotten into a desperate enough situation where he thought admitting to murder, maybe they would just let him go. He kind of halfway thought this would happen, and now he's realizing what admitting to murder really entails, even if you are the hero, which he's thinking that he's going to be by wearing this mask. So he's really getting into it, but you can tell Tammy and Graham are just they're still acting like they're on his side with Chris's dad. But if you had a filter that collected everything except for Graham and Tammy's intentions, it would sound more like, Chris saying, "It was dark. I was shaking. Yeah, that's great, Chris. So where did you bring the bodies again?" "Survey 319. I was scared. I was confused." Yes. So are they above ground or below ground?" "I didn't know what to do. That's kind of what it sounds like if you look into their intentions alone. Chris is going over the top of this performance to convince us that his new mask is real. Graham and Tammy don't buy it at all, and they're just trying to get him to reveal where the bodies are because then they can collect evidence that will undercut his bogus story that he's coming up with now. That's all they want, is to get the evidence. And he's gotten to the point where he feels he has no other choice but to confess, yet he still needs everyone to think he's a good guy. So even though he's delaying their going to get the bodies, he's trying to go over the top to convince them. So he even comes out and says, like they're saying, "Where are the bodies, Chris? Where are the bodies?" And he says, "I'm sorry." And Graham and Tammy, Graham says, I know you are. And then Tammy says, I know you are. Yep, we all know you are, Chris. A sorry sack of shit. Because we finally see who Chris really cares about. Himself. We finally see the emotion that he hasn't showed through this whole time, and he starts crying for the first time. It's been 3 days. If he's remorseful about what he did, he hasn't shown that, and has even come off jovial about it. If he is regretful, if he's empathetic about what his family went through at his hands, he hasn't shown that. But now that he's starting to realize he admitted to murder and can never undo that, he can't go back and say, oh wait, I was just lying. He's starting to cry for himself, the one person in the world he actually cares about. Because now everyone's going to know that he committed murder, and they're going to know what he did to the bodies, and now he's crying at that realization. Crying because everyone is going to see behind the mask that he's been wearing for years. He can no longer say that he's a loving family man who would never do anything bad and would never commit murder. Everyone is going to see that that mask was just a bunch of baloney. And he's crying because of that. Now, think of his victims. Think of Shanann, looking up at the man she married, the man whose kids she gave birth to and helped raise, as he chokes the life out of her while saying he wants a separation. Think about what she was going through at that moment. No tears for that. Chris has not shed a single tear about that. Think about Bella and Celeste watching as their dad, the man they love and trust more than anyone in the world, is treating their mom like a bag of garbage, ignoring their questions about, what are you doing to mommy? What's going on here, daddy? And he's just being really cold to them, saying, nothing, she just doesn't feel good. We're just taking her to the hospital. And even at 3 and 4, they know that this is not how you treat someone that you're taking to a hospital. And he's just being cold and ignoring them until he gets them to a place where it's convenient to smother the life out of them too. No tears for them and what they went through. No remorse or regret about what he put them through. And now, this same man, imagine the ghosts of his family watching him. After what he put them through, now he's begging for empathy as he cries for himself. Fittingly, in more ways than one, his next line is, please don't think any less of me. And Graham and Tammy have already figured out that Chris is a monster. They've already figured out that he is just a lowly human being who was willing to sacrifice his family for his own selfish needs, his own selfish goals, and was willing to sacrifice the lives of his family to get that. So they're already thinking he's about as low as it gets, and they're even surprised that he's this low. His feelings are this low that he would say this, and it doesn't even process in Tammy's mind because she says, what? Even though Chris said it loud and clear, he has to repeat himself. Please don't think any less of me. And Graham and Tammy don't answer because if they were to answer, it would derail their plans of making him think that he's on their side and we're all in it together and we still think you're a good man. But I think I can speak for Graham and Tammy and every human being with a brain when I say that, Chris, don't worry. We could not possibly think any less of you. So at this point, we get the best visual of why this cretin thought he would get away with the crime. Because on one side, we have Chris's dad, who is jumping in saying, Shanann put a picture of a doll with a sheet over its face on Facebook and said, what do you say to this? So on the one side, you have Chris's dad just immediately believing everything that Chris says and then jumping in to add his own details to support Chris's story. And on the other side of the room, you have the the interrogators, who are scrutinizing Chris's story with the questions that everyone who doesn't know Chris personally is asking. And so they say, what do you make of that, Chris? And Chris immediately says, she was making fun of it. She thought it was funny. So Graham says, did Bella do it? And Chris says, I don't know. So from the discovery, we know that Chris is actually the one who took the picture and sent it to Shanann when she was out of town. He was the one making fun of it. He was the one who thought it was funny. And as far as not knowing if Bella did it, he was with Bella and Celeste when he took the picture and sent it to Shanann. So I would hope that he was with them long enough to see whether or not they did that. And even if he left the room for 5 minutes and came back to see that they had set up the doll that way with the sheet over its face, he would know it was them. So he did know, and he's saying she thought it was funny and she was making fun of what she was going to do because that's what he was doing, making fun of it and letting Shanann know what he was going to do. So, finally, after 8 hours of interrogation, after 3 days of denials and cover-ups, after hundreds of examples that prove the Chris Watts rule to be true, we get the first exception to the Chris Watts rule. The first denial that turns out to be true. It's when they can tell, Graham and Tammy can tell that Chris is just falling apart as his mask is falling apart, and they're trying to build up his ego so he'll keep going and give them more information. So Graham says, Chris, you're a good man. And Chris right away says, I am not a good man. Congratulations, Chris. You finally said something that's true. But still with the evil intentions of mitigating his actions. That's the only way the only reason he's saying it is, the only reason he reveals any nugget of truth is to mitigate just how evil his actions really were. And this is one of those examples, the first major and maybe the only major exception to the Chris Watts rule. I am not a good man. And then this whimpering, sniveling cretin says the most satisfying line in the whole interrogation. As he's crying, he says, nothing will ever be the same again. And why that's so satisfying? He's realizing that murder is forever. It's what we talked about a few videos ago. Murder follows you around for the rest of your life. And now that he's admitted to it, he can't go back. He can't take it off and hang it in the closet. Everyone that ever looks at him, talks about him, or even thinks about him, they're going to be thinking about the guy that murdered. Not the nice guy anymore, not the loving family man who would never murder. They're going to be seeing and talking about the murderer. And that's what he's crying about right now. Nothing will ever be the same again. No one will ever look at him and see that nice guy that he needs, that his whole existence is dependent on what people think of him, thinking that he's a nice guy. That's his whole existence. And that will never be the same again after this. Now compare that to the night before with Graham. Compare that to earlier on this day with Tammy in the polygraph. So calm and confident in his mask being that he's a nice guy. No remorse, no regret, no tears. And now nothing will ever be the same again. So we really are seeing the lowest a human being can stoop here. Because they keep trying to get him to say, Chris, where are the bodies? Help us find them. We want to help your family. We want to get them out of the cold. And Chris keeps hesitating and he doesn't want to tell them. And he comes right out and says, "What's going to happen?" And the human being, Graham, says, "We're going to help them get out of there." Because that's what any human being would be concerned about at this point, getting the victims out of the unsavory location and situation that they're in and giving them proper respect. People spend thousands of dollars to respect the bodies of those they care about. And all Chris is going to say is, "No, I mean, what's going to happen?" What do you really mean? I will be happy once again to fill in the blank here. He just says, "No, I mean," and what he means to say is, "No, I mean, what's going to happen to me?" That's all he's concerned about. What's going to happen to me? Not what's going to happen to the bodies he threw out like trash. What's going to happen to me? But he knows how horrific that's going to make him look. So he leaves that blank. So I just wanted to fill in that blank for him, just so everyone knows what he really meant. So to answer that question, by the way, because Graham and Tammy can't, they want to stay on his side and not derail their plans. What's going to happen to you is you're going to be exposed, buddy boy. You're going to be exposed. And if you didn't want to be exposed, if you didn't want people to know what you would actually do, don't do it in the first place. Couldn't be any simpler than that. You don't want people to know what you did? Don't do it in the first place. You would think a 33-year-old man would know that by now. Everyone thinks I'm a good man. They're going to see this and they're going to be like, "I can never." So what he means is to say is, I can never undo this. I can never fix this. Now that I've admitted to it, I can never convince anyone that I'm a nice guy that would never murder. People's opinions of him are more important than the fate of his family. That's the most important thing in his world, is people's opinions of him. And that's what's becoming clear now. He's realizing, I'm going to fucking prison. This is fucking horrible. To him, that's the horrible part. That's the horrible part, that he's going to prison. Not what he did to deserve prison. No tears about that. Only tears about the fact that he got caught and now he's going to prison. So at this point, Graham and Tammy are realizing that Chris's dad, who's jumping in and defending him, and they're realizing that Chris's dad is kind of like a booger clogging up the airways of the interrogation room now and getting in the way of truth. So they have to pick him out and toss him into the trash bin of another room. And they can breathe again. And now that they can breathe again with the booger out of the room, now they can begin picking apart Chris's completely ridiculous, nonsensical, and awkward story that makes no sense. But we'll have to get into that in the next video because we're running out of time. But before we finish this up, the monumental revelation I had, and after watching Chris's elaborate, complicated plan just fall apart, I realized the secret to beating an interrogation and outsmarting the detectives. And all you criminals out there, if you're thinking of committing a crime, you might want to get a pen and paper and write this down, because this is very important. The secret to beating an interrogation and outsmarting the detectives: don't commit the crime. It works almost every time. Almost every time. Your chances are much higher than if you commit the crime. So tattoo that if you need to. Tattoo it on your forehead so you can remember it every time you look in the mirror. If you're thinking about committing a crime, don't commit the crime. You'll walk out of that interrogation room and you'll wake up in your own bed the next day almost every time. So we'll get into the ridiculous story next time in part 14, and I'll see you then.